Alright, time for another DraftPhysics.com video presentation. So I thought we'd go over, there's a few other experimental videos out there, and they're worth at least a mention and such. So this one, I don't even know the purpose of it. He compares the rolling of a object that has all the mass very close to the center of the mass. So it's just a steel pipe rolling down a ramp, and it oscillates like a pendulum. Now you could argue that any time it spins on the surface, there is friction, and it's giving back its energy in those circumstances. And then he rolls an object where obviously the mass is way on the outside, so it's not a 2-to-1 relationship or something. So if you took a pipe with two different circumferences, 2-to-1 relationship, it might be an experiment where we could glean some information, in the sense that if it comes out that the twice the circumference is twice the time, then that would verify my theory anyway. And I think it even verifies conventional physics. Frankly, I think conventional physics agrees that gears work, that the ratio of the 2-to-1 relationship, putting the mass on the outside versus putting on the mass on the inside, will just double. Okay, and if you use half the amount of mass, then you'll get half the consequence. So this experiment, like I say, it comes up with a 6-to-1. Well, obviously he has this on a circumference that's much more than 2-to-1. So he's moved part of the mass, maybe more than half of it, to this much further circumference, which means it has to rotate the material at a much higher speed, and therefore it takes longer to roll because it has to actually spin into revolutions. And it can't, plainly, and it spends a lot more time on the ramp, so you can understand that all the extra gravity that it's getting hit with, because it's in the gravity longer, is just going into friction. So if we had a scale underneath this ramp and we just measured how much over time it weighed, obviously this would weigh more because it was on the ramp much longer. Blah 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 blah. All right, so not a very interesting, not a very useful experiment, frankly. I don't see how it proves either theory in any way whatsoever. It does prove to Brozo, I would hope, that angular momentum is a real thing, and that you can't roll solid object against hollow object and expect that their velocities aren't going to be greatly changed by the fact that you have the mass in different orientations of distance from the center of mass. This experiment, I think, proves me right, so I don't know what. So it's measuring little things. Okay, so he gets 2-to-1 relationship, and he's dropping them on a spring. And instead of actually measuring how much the spring compresses, he has a little thing for them to hit. And his claim is that the twice mass going 1 unit of distance doesn't hit the little thing, but the half mass going 4 times the distance does hit the little thing, indicating that somehow it has more. But if you look at the images, the moreness is so minor that maybe somebody could argue, gee, if you only dropped it a millimeter further, they both would have hit it. So anyway, so this is the one mass, 2 velocity. So this is the longer drop. Yeah, there it is. Wait for it, and it goes down, and so this is the big mass. It's 2 mass going the 10 centimeters, and the other one would be 40. I mean, those are just the numbers. It's a 4-to-1 relationship in distance. But you can see it goes almost to this little platform. And then he does the other one, I think. Let's see. Alright, so 1 mass, 2 velocity. This is the longer drop of the lighter mass. Funny, it looks like we have a better image of that. And it bangs onto the little thing. So that's the extent of the argument. So I'd say it's pretty weakly done. That's my opinion. Okay. Why not just video from the right angle both objects? We just try to get this so it doesn't hit it. It clearly doesn't. The other one clearly does. But clearly there's no indication that this is going 0.4 further or twice as far or anything at all. So there's absolutely no useful information. So that's my statement about that. Then the Dispar lab guy did another spring experiment. This time he did put the spring on the right surface, but it's clearly not enough spring. Okay, the spring clearly just bends. And so we're stuck with that as the statement about these spring experiments. So maybe just go to, well, I guess we'll just watch one of these in the middle. So that's the lighter, the heavy mass going slow. Okay, and it's a very relaxed, easy kind of thing. And but the funny thing is these numbers are, who knows? This is 927 and then 1276. So the reflection is way short. So it's getting back a lot less energy. A lot less. And in the other experiment, a lot more of the energy is given back. So you have to wonder, why is that? I mean, that's there's like a 3-to-1 difference. So in the slow experiment, you get a crappy reflection. In the faster velocity experiment, you get you get much more of your energy back out of the spring. So it's sort of an indication that something's not quite right. In one case, it was like 800, well, it was, the bottom number was like 1600. Well, let's just play another one of these. What the hell? It's not that much time.
78, 70, 82.
So there, look at that difference. 1082 and 1678. So somehow this spring failed to collect the energy in some way, or it's failing to give it back, but you've got these dramatically different numbers. And so we'll go to the faster one and see that it's an obvious difference that indicates something's way wrong. So 464, 532. I mean, less than 100, and the other one was close to 500. So in the first case, it's 500, almost 40% of the energy didn't get back out of the spring. And in this case, it's only 10%, 15%. So a huge difference in the efficiency. I would argue this spring isn't straight at the end, which is really bad. So the faster car obviously has to convey the compression into the spring. Now, if the spring is stiff and small, it's going to have a hard time collecting that high velocity. So velocity does matter. Springs have a velocity limitation. You hit them with a bullet, they'll just fracture. So there is a reasoning to understand that you do have to consider these facts. This spring obviously does look bent and distorted, and the higher velocity experiment is going to mean that bending and distortion is going to be accelerated in terms of its consequence, because everything's going to happen much quicker, and it has to correct for that distortion, and maybe it can't make that correction. So we'll just play some of this. You can see there's a lot more compression, agreed, but you could also see in some of the examples that the spring is still bending. Okay, it's doing this. Instead of compressing evenly this way, it's compressing this way. It's bending. So obviously bending is a lot easier to do, you could argue. It's less energy than compressing all the coils. Okay. So I'm just saying, this isn't, this isn't good enough. So that's my statement. This isn't good enough for me to draw any conclusions. Obviously, the two experiments, there's something distinctly different in their function, in the sense that this high speed is able to collect all the energy or most of it and repel it back again. And in the first case, somehow, a lot of the energy wasn't returned. Now, some of this might have to do with the conversion of the angular momentum. He has kind of heavy wheels on the carts. The wheels have rotational energy. The rotational energy has to be converted into motion, and that's not always easy to do. So the carts could be lifting up, pushing down. They could be doing something to distort, okay, how the energy is getting collected and converted from angular momentum into linear momentum. All right, so those three, I don't think there's, oh yeah, the Gosling guy. Yeah. Yeah. All right, so I'll go find that. I guess we'll draw some of this stuff first, just so you can follow along if you haven't been following along, and just for, it doesn't hurt to start over and saying, what are we arguing about? So the concept is kind of simple. There's an argument about what springs do. Now, whether they collect kinetic energy or they collect momentum. Now, I'd say it's obvious they collect momentum because they measure weight, and you can't measure weight in any other way than say weight is momentum. In my opinion, just no logic to any other statement. So the simple argument is you take a mass and you put it on a spring and it compresses at a certain amount. Okay, so there's a certain amount of displacement here, okay, in change in the spring. And then if I add a second mass of the same mass, okay, what I'll get is twice of that distance. And so I'll compress the spring 2 displacements. 2 units of what could be called force are now in the spring, and with that compression. And their argument is that no, it's kinetic energy, so the spring doesn't do this. Well, it has to do this. Frankly, there's no choice, right? 200-pound people weigh 200 pounds because they compress the spring twice as much, so there's no way to avoid this as being true. But somehow they're saying when the second mass went on, okay, so when the first mass goes on, I got this displacement, it put in 1 unit of force into the spring. And then when I put this second weight on, I got 3 units of force. So even though it's only compressed, twice as much, there's somehow 3 units of force got put into the spring. And so now the spring equals 4 units of force. 4 units of kinetic energy, however you want to look at it. And I would obviously say that can't be true. It's only got 2 units of force in it, and it can only do 2 units of work, let's say. So they're doing different experiments to try to illustrate this, and so he did do an experiment that was rather simple. Take a weight from 4 times the height. I should draw this the other way, of course. Alright, so you take a half weight from 4 times the height, and you take a full weight from 1 unit of height, and you just drop them, these difference in distance. 4 units of distance for the one 1 unit of distance for the other. Now, I'm saying gravity is a time-dependent force. This actually takes twice the time to free fall. This takes 1 unit of time. So it's pretty easy to understand that this will be going twice as fast. That's the rule. This one's half the velocity, twice the mass, inverted. They have to apply the same pressure. They don't really have a choice when they hit the ground. They're the same weight when they hit the ground. The same bang, push. It's just going to happen at a different speed. So the application of the force here will be faster than the application of the force here. But it will be the same force. So there's no difference in me saying I'm going to compress a spring fast or I'm going to compress a spring slow. It just matters how far I hit the spring, how deep it goes. So this can't really matter. Velocity shouldn't screw up a spring that much. But anyway, so he did it dropping it on a lump of clay. Okay. And when he did it, dropping it on a lump of clay, the two lumps of clay compressed exactly the same amount. That's an experiment he did. Now, he didn't show us that one because that's in perfect agreement with what I'm saying. So it was a simple experiment, just a rod, drop the weight, compress the clay. And instead of showing the experiment and explaining how it's 100% incorrect, how it's completely a lie, how it's distorting your understanding, no, he just ignored it, pretended it didn't take place. Okay, so that experiment exists. We just don't get to see it. So it came out perfect. Compressed the clay exactly the same amount of work here, same amount of pressure here, demonstrated. And he wouldn't show the experiment because it doesn't demonstrate what he wants to demonstrate. So we don't get to see that experiment. So then he contrives a new experiment where he has a detector on a scale. So the little scale plunger moves down and it pushes something ahead of it, a little marker. Now the obvious defect I point out is there's nothing to stop this little marker from going too far. There just isn't. It can do it. Okay, so it's a liability. So it's not a great way to mark. Where if he made something where he took a little lump of clay, let's say, and he put a little pin in it, and then he had the plunger come down, hit the pin's not going to get any momentum to speak of, and it'll just push into the clay as far as this thing goes down, but there's no reason it would go all the way down. And he could just put a little strip of clay, and he could just rip the clay, tear the clay down to a point, and there'd be a point where the clay would stop moving, and that would mark it, but he wouldn't pay any attention to those advices about how to create something to allow you to understand how far did the spring compress. The clay doesn't push back, so we can just see how much the clay compresses. But springs push back, so you have to catch that one moment where it's the maximum compression, and you're trying to capture that. Now, you can't capture it because it all happens so damn fast. He did actually videotape one little section where he showed us how fast it happens. And the spring actually moves down so fast that you probably can't even capture it. It's really fast, especially with these. These are real weights, okay? This is half-pound weights that are being dropped. So it all happens really fast. Anyway, so he's been fiddling with those experiments, and he's gotten kind of various results, but they're certainly way inconsistent with this result. So way different than this result. The new results are somewhere I don't know what 1.2 to 1.7 who knows, but they're way different than these results. There is a difference in what the spring is recording. So this could be the fact that springs do have Hooke's law only takes place within a certain region of the spring. So you could argue that any time there's a speed limit based on how stiff the spring is, and then there's also a useful pushing limit. The beginning of the push isn't too effective, and if you push too far, it gets ineffective. So there's only this kind of range where you want to keep all the action of the spring in this range. But anyway, so we have a couple of he just keeps playing with his little device and saying this is a true reading of reality, when there's no way to back up read it, there's no way to check it to see that it recorded correctly at all, so it's not very useful. And then he even stopped using a tape measure for the measured distances. He's not using any kind of standard release distance, lots of things wrong. Alright. And so now he's moved to a wheel spinning thing. So I guess I could draw that real quickly, semi-quickly. So he's going to spin a bicycle wheel. So I don't, it's like you're saying, why would he go to all this trouble to invent these kind of niche, bizarre, kind of weird experiments when the simple ones, like just dropping the mass on the spring or just swinging a pendulum into a spring and taking a reasonable video of it, or like I said, just have a lump of clay next to the spring and just say, well, the clay is going to be really easy to compress, And so you'll get a pretty close reading of how far your spring got compressed by seeing how much the clay got compressed. All right. But no, nothing simple. So he has a gear on a bicycle wheel, and he's going to put a rope around it. Now, one thing I'd say is kind of these pulley things get a little bit complicated. So he's he's in one case he's pulling the rope this far on the pulley, and in the other case he's pulling the rope twice as far because he's making twice the compression. He's pulling on a spring, so this is pulling a spring this way now. And then he's going to count the rotations. But the catch is what he added to this, wheel was he added friction to the bearing. So he created some device. This is the rod from the bearing, and he has some mechanical device that pushes against some other rubber thing that pushes against a surface. So he's created extra friction in here, and because he's certain the friction that he's created here is going to be linear. So even though most of us have experience that, like especially with gearworks or flywheels, lots of mechanisms where the faster you spin it, the more the surface breaks down and it doesn't create as much friction. Now in some cases it's the other way around. The hotter it gets, the stickier it gets. But there's huge variation. That speed can mean that the bearing is much more efficient. So the faster you spin something, the more efficient its bearings get, because they all fit into one space and they all spin at the same distance. Where at a slow speed they're all kind of banging into each other and it's a little sloppy. So you can't know that this is a fair cop. That this mechanism is going to treat the slow thing the same as the fast thing. The other point is any friction thing you create, you have static friction. That means that the friction is the most at the very beginning. So the static friction is higher, than the running friction. So if you put it on a scale, it would do something like this. The running friction is this level. The static friction, the initial friction, is high. So if the total amount of what you're doing is going to be small, you'd know that this big hump in the middle, if the two tests are like this and like this, well, obviously the hump is going to mean more to this than it meant to this. It's going to be a smaller percentage in the average. So how much it changes your average velocity is going to be dramatically changed because the hump, is going to be a much bigger part of this average. So even though these two things are supposed to be doing the same thing here, it won't matter because your reading won't show they were doing the same thing, because for this one, the big getting over the barrier is going to be a much bigger burden. A bigger percentage of its total voyage is going to be degraded. So its average is going to be 15, and this average is going to be 17 or 19, because this one the hump has to be averaged over a much larger volume of information. All right, so anyway, I have a couple of points I'd say that changing this amount of rotation, what he should do is have the string go once around and then attach it to the spring. So they're both pulling on the same surface of the gear. One of them doesn't have more friction and one of them have less. Obviously the further around I put the pulley, the more it sticks to the pulley, and the more grip I'm going to get on the pulley, the more it's going to change how much energy I'm going to transfer. It's just it's better to have. That's all I don't know how much it made a difference in this case. Obviously I think this is the big flaw. He's created a friction device for which he has no theory that it produced an even amount of pressure for both experiments. So I don't even know if I need to show it, but I guess I might as well. So his results were, we do it with the one spring compression, and it rotates one time, and then he does it for twice the compression, that is, stretches the string twice as much, and he gets numbers in the 3 range. So he didn't quite get what he was looking for. but he clearly didn't get what you would expect is 1 to 2. Okay, so it didn't come out 1 to 2. It came out more like 1 to 3, 1 to 3 plus, let's even say. All right, and he wants 4. So again, we're stuck somewhere in between. In these experiments aren't producing results that are very well established to be decisively in one camp or the other camp. They're doing this. Not very useful. Somewhere in the middle crap. All right, so we'll show some of that. But I mean, there's no. See, this is the thing. I'm obligated. So these people will show an experiment where it looks like they win, and I'm obligated to point out defects. Okay, just like they could, they can do what Franklin Who did. They can just roll something down a ramp and let the little cart roll down the surface, and they can say, see, it rolled 4 times as fast. And then somebody has to explain, yeah, but it was really only going half the velocity 3/4 of the way down the track. Clearly the friction isn't linear. Clearly the faster thing was given a huge break in terms of how much friction it had to average friction per foot. Its average friction per foot was way down compared to the other. So you have to explain. And then so the experiment, like I said, he did, where the clay experiment, where it came out perfect, I win. And he even made a video lamenting the fact that he couldn't get it to come out any other way. Did it all day and it kept coming out the same way. And he doesn't show that experiment. So they don't have to explain why that experiment was completely flawed, why it was completely broken, why it wasn't telling the truth. They don't have to explain. But I do. It's just part of their duplicity, part of their hypocrisy, part of the shenanigans. So this is like the 3 shenanigan stooges. There's probably 5 of them actually. And that's all they're up to. They're just engineering experiments to come out their way. I mean, Brozo is a classic example. He deliberately engineers the experiment to produce his results. He does it numerous ways and in numerous renditions, and if they don't come out his way, we never see the experiment. If it comes out his way, we see it. So it's clearly confirmation bias. And, is this a rational way to do physics, or a fair way, or the right way? I'd argue clearly not. Okay. All right, so yes, let's go do the bicycle thing. Yeah, the bicycle thing. I just, like I said, you just look at it and just say, why is he doing, why are we doing complex experiments when you should be going simpler and simpler? So in this video, turn that on. I turned it on. Turn it on. Okay. So in this video, all right, he's explaining his friction mechanism. So won't bother playing it, but he doesn't even do that ahead of time. He doesn't tell you about that first before he does this experiment, indicating, okay, this is how it works, when not exactly. Okay, so he talks about the ratchet and this and that. So that's the 1 rotation. 1 1/4, which isn't, that's true. It actually was 1 1/2, 1 1/4, and then it was, less than 4, so it was 3. So obviously it was right almost in that middle ground again, of being almost a completely useless experimental result, because it's basically in between the 2 predictions, which isn't very useful. All right, and clearly, so there was no indication in all of this that, oh yes, but I created this friction that's taking place against the axle, and I'm really smart, so I know that the friction is perfect and perfectly fair, when of course he doesn't know any of that. So I think this is the 4 times. All right, no. So that's 120, so let's do the 170. So you can see he's rotating the wheel to wind the string onto the gear, and frankly, one's going to be wound more than the other one's going to be wound, which probably isn't the best way to do the experiment. I mean, the pull cord, okay, should be the same amount of cord for both pulls. The same angular pull. I don't even know quite how to say it. I mean, they both should be pulling from the same position, so to speak, of connection to the wheel. And then we're back to string, stretching strings, which isn't a great idea. I mean, how much elasticity is in the strings he's using? So he's not even using something more precise than a piece of string as the conduit. The torsion tension conduit is really quite suspect as being a non-real variable in the experiment. It's almost like putting another spring in the experiment and pretending it's not there. Alright, so from my perspective, too complex an experiment for too simple a question. Does that, are springs compressed by momentum, weight, or are they compressed by something else? I mean, momentum is weight. So it almost goes back to, I've posed this before, but theoretically, okay, there's absolutely no reason that we can't come up with a velocity. Now, my calculations say it's 1 mile an hour, but it's using this crappy little scale as the way of detecting that number. Look, I've probably broken it a little bit. Anyway, that you could move any object, an elephant or a mouse, and I could move it at 1 mile an hour and crash it into a scale, and then it bounces back, and the impulse weight will be its atomic weight. It will weigh its mass. So the elephant would weigh whatever, a ton, and the mouse would weigh whatever, a half a pound. So I'm just saying, anything I would bang into it, I would be able to reveal its mass, because I'm basically duplicating the fact that the force of gravity creates a velocity in you, and every object gets the same velocity. So every object falls on a scale technically with the same velocity, and it's just their mass that's going to decide how much the spring is compressed. And so there's, the v squared part, the kinetic energy part, becomes quite irrelevant if everything has the same velocity. You can't come up with a different answer, okay, for what's going into the scale if the velocities are all the same. Squaring becomes completely irrelevant to the difference between a mouse and an elephant. If you're not squaring any velocity and all you have is the mass to change, then you can't help but, get consistent results where something that has half the momentum will have to have, okay, there's no choice, because all you're changing is the masses, will have to have, twice the weight or half the weight. If something has more weight, something has more mass, whatever, twice the mass has to weigh twice as much. Alright. Has to have an impulse force that's twice as much. There's no theoretical way of escaping this. Okay? I don't know how else to say it. Alright, so I'll pause here, see if there's anything else to throw in here. Alright, I just saw a comment by Farley where Farley is saying he's not Farley. So I just to show that, this conversation is so ruined by all these fakers that the one side is having as their ally. So people who are just out to hurt or damage me are allies of theirs. Not because they're making great physics arguments, not because of any of that, but because they're just, on their side. So they'll really will be allies with the Nazis if it gets their war won. That's how really despicable these characters are. So all of these people do. Gosling knows, Brozo knows. They all know this Watto guy is Mickey Farley. They all know that. All right. When Draft can't answer a physics critique, so I spend all day doing that, you're the people who can't show an experiment that comes out the wrong way. That's what Brozo's admitted, and that's what Ian Gosling did right in front of you. Right in front of you, he said, I'm not even going to show you the experiment, because you might look at it and think it's credible. And I know it has to be wrong, so I'm going to engineer one that comes out my way. I mean, it couldn't be clearer. He accuses other person of being Farley. So there's nothing ambiguous or erroneous about the accusation. It's clear. Okay. As an excuse to ban them. So what's that? Who needs the excuse in the first place? But clearly, I can ban them based on the content of the comment, because the comment will just contain what's right here, lies. When Draft can't answer, I answer almost everything. What don't I answer? I mean, I'll read complete shit comments and respond to them before I delete and block. I'll give people gigantic warnings. I'll spend days warning them that what you're doing is wasting my time and you really can't do that. All right, I don't know who this Farley, so this is the big joke, right? Somebody who on their side doesn't know who Farley is, okay? The guy who, posted images of my sisters, did all kinds of stuff, just to play with my personal life, just because he could. He can get away with it, so he does it because he can get away with it, because there's no decency police on the internet. You can be an indecent, rude, obnoxious piece of shit. All right, and we've decided that that's the internet we want, is give people the freedom to be really rude. All right. Who is Farley? Presumably one of Draft's opponents in Answer. So this is a guy who, all these assholes know that this fucker has fake conversations with himself. Like he'll post a comment and then respond to his own comment and have a whole fake news conversation. So they're basically endorsing fake news. And they like that. These assholes think that makes the internet so much cooler when you have a whole bunch of liars making fake stories up. It just makes it all so much more fun. I mean, this is their ally. All right, Draft's opponents in the sewers of YouTube, where they make videos yelling at each other. So again, these are all people who never make a video. Okay, they don't make any content, real content. No, I can't say it. Farley has actually made a couple of videos, okay, but nowhere close to anything reasonable or on a subject. Draft even mocked when one of his opponents committed suicide in real life. Where did that happen? So again, just a gigantic lie. Hoffladay, I made the argument that I was better friends with Hoffladay than any of you assholes were. I think if Hoffladay was here to speak for himself, he did speak for himself, frankly. He said it right in his goodbye video. He mentioned me. He mentioned our conversations. So what the fuck are you talking about? All right. Some kid in his late teens or 20s. What the hell are you even talking about now? He's not even talking about Huffley. He's talking about the guy who I found his video 2 years after he was dead. What the fuck are you talking about? And I pointed out here, this is really an illustration of my anti-natalist perspective, in the sense that this is just such a stupid tragedy. Here's a person who actually has a brain, and unfortunately has a little schizophrenia, apparently. And so he killed himself to prove that he's going to be back on Earth again. He had a little bit of a reincarnation philosophy, and he wanted to prove his reincarnation philosophy, so he said, I'll kill myself, and then I'll prove that I came back. Something like that. What the fuck are you talking about, you crazy fucker? I mean, to make some accusation that I make fun of somebody's suicide is just ridiculous. I mean, I've made hundreds of videos speaking of my empathy for people being put in this preposterous circumstance where they have to kill themselves in some stupid and bizarre manner because you fascist motherfuckers are telling them they have to live. Oh, God, you people are so disgusting. I am not Farley. You're a liar. Okay, clearly. Why would you choose this Watto name then? That's Farley's. He invented that. Okay, it's clear Farley invented that. So why are you using one of Farley's sock account names? It's like saying you have the name Ton. Okay, that's Farley's rhetoric. Okay, and challenge draft to show a single, let's see, post of mine where I used his last name. Again, it's a post of yours. Who are you if you're not Farley? Okay, I'm saying Farley clearly has done all of these things, and clearly this is a Farley sock account, let alone his family members. My comment was 100% on topic. None of the Watto comments are on topic. Where was this on topic? Bringing up some kid who committed suicide. Where the fuck is that on topic? You're just so... this is just such a stupid waste of time. About analyzing a lever in deep space. Oh, yeah, right. I pointed out that as soon as the incident mass meets the lever, it effectively becomes part of the lever assembly and is... its KE and momentum will... its KE and momentum, whatever that could possibly mean. Momentum is part of KE. I don't want to surprise you with some kind of new piece of information, but KE has MV right in the middle of it. We'll now have to do extra work to move the whole lever system. So it can't do anything other than exchange its momentum. That's what will happen in space. So you want to play some other game that the thing will somehow gain more than, okay, if you add up all the rotational energy and all of the movement in space, all it will exchange is its momentum. Nothing else will happen, okay? And you can't show or prove anything other than that happens. Nothing does this KE thing in space. All right. It effectively becomes part of the lever assembly, and its KE and momentum will now have to do extra work to move the whole lever system. So he doesn't have this experiment with anything called a significant mass. So make the masses significant, that is the fulcrum. Make this fulcrum immovable, and then make this argument. If the fulcrum's immovable, it's not going to be an argument. So stick this little lever on the side of the space shuttle and then see if you move the whole space shuttle. My argument will be that you won't even come close. Okay, it effectively becomes part of the lever assembly. Oh, I already read. Okay, but he just yelled and banned me. So just more bullshit. I ban anything that post a comment on my channel with a Watto name. W-O-T. If you have W-O-T as some part of your name, I'm going to automatically block you. Yeah, that's right. He continues to lie and say NASA doesn't use KE. Okay, so it's not a lie. Okay, for every thrust analysis in space. We're not talking about in Earth's atmosphere. We're not talking about rocket engines. We're just talking about moving and navigating. Okay, we're talking about landing a lunar module on the moon. There are no KE calculations. When I already showed him the shuttle's heat shields, see, just nothing to do. Nothing whatsoever. These are all just fake numbers. They can make up a number about how much energy, how much heat, how much this, how much that. They can make up any numbers as long as they're relatively connected. It doesn't matter. So it doesn't matter if you say 500 joules or 10,000 joules. As long as the other answer you're going to get is 50,000 or 5,000. As long as the ratio of your differences are the same, it doesn't matter that you have the wrong original number. Just like you didn't notice that MV was giving you wrong answers for 200 years. Well, 156 years or something. They didn't notice that, wow, MV is way off. Because that's before it had the half in front of it, asshole. Because, yes, it still worked for relative comparisons. It just didn't work for absolute numbers. So, just more bullshit. I'm just saying, I mean, so predictable. The heat shields have absolutely nothing to do with navigating in space. Are designed to test based on KE. So, just more bullshit. This is what he does. Yes, this is what they do. You say navigating in space, and they talk about atmospheric heat shields. Okay, he bans people from his channel so he can continue lying. So what lie is there? Let's see the big line of lies I have committed. Let's see, post them somewhere, and I will link to them. So post your list of lies, and I will link to it, and I will show it to be absolute crap. And let's see if you can get any of your cronies, okay, to sit there and accept that, yes, he's a proven liar. Okay. That no one has countered his arguments. Again, where? Desperately. 2 years, I say, just draw it. Illustrate a lever. Explain a lever. Show a video of a lever. Do something to indicate that these mechanisms, that gears do not conserve momentum. Just show me some evidence of their failure of all of these elemental devices we use all the time, and show how they completely fail to do what we all know they actually do. Oh man, what a hunk of shit. Anyway. I don't think there's probably nothing else new. Oh wow, he actually made a video responding to the comments in your video. Yeah, I've only done that for my whole existence on YouTube. That's right, people say shit and then I respond to what they say. I think that's what's called conversation. Jeez, these people are just such pieces of shit. He couldn't be more clear at this point that the guy understands only enough to make the biggest possible mess. So again, what do you understand? Do you understand what a soliton and a monad is? Do you understand rolling distance and how friction has changed? Have you responded to a single argument I have made? Oh no, you haven't. This is just amazing crap. Okay, he's so clueless and self-deluded. So I can say this I'll say this about physicist Michael. Maybe I'll put clueless and self-deluded in the title of my video. Okay, it's just sad. I'm sorry, but it just has to be said. Whatever you decide to do, good luck, Michael. So again, these are all people trying to discourage this conversation. Nobody should challenge conventional physics. No physicist should actually man up and have the balls to actually answer questions. They should all just accept the Catholic doctrine. We should all just believe what the authorities say. That's it. That's all they're for. So Ian Gosling, do you take responsibility for this? You're the one creating this anti-challenge, okay, attitude. Brozo, do you accept this is what you're creating? You're for the Inquisition. You do understand that, right? You're sitting here helping people to say, censor the conversation, stop the conversation. We do not have to prove anything. We do not have to show anything. We're just believers, and you should be a believer too. I'm a pepper. You're a pepper. We all have to be fucking peppers. Fuck you. I like Coke better. God damn it. I'll keep reading since these are newer comments I haven't seen yet. I just, fuck these people. I mean, they can't really, there's not a dildo machine being sold on eBay big enough, for these people deserve the biggest one you can find. It's a spectacle, isn't it? What's spectacle about it? It's a physics argument. Can't you stay on the fucking subject? Oh, they're just amazing. Draft thinks the physics community ignores him because they're cowards. Well, I've sort of proven that over and over again. Oh, amazing. And can't answer him. Well, when they do answer, the answer is ludicrous. I mean, AB science, right? I mean, I gave him the simple question, what creates more thrust? Okay, a speeding bullet or the recoiling gun. And he says, well, thrust isn't really understood to be a real thing in the actual universe because it's a Higgs boson complementary, blah, blah. You know, he just goes into a big pile of crap saying somehow he doesn't understand what a thrust is. Yes, I've shown they can't answer the questions. That's why they run the fuck away. I mean, if I ask you to tell me, do you really think if I drop a little weight on top of a little car moving this way, that I can consume half the energy of the car? That somehow there's all this bending and sparks and crap that happens. Okay, and it doesn't happen because I actually did drop a weight in gravity, but it happens for some other reason. And that half the energy disappears because you won't be able to show where it went. You people are just such pieces of crud. Okay. Let's see. I can't answer him, but he really just an arrogant curmudgeon. Okay. Maybe I'll put that in the title of a video. Whatever. Pompous, authoritarian. Okay. Who would take vastly too much effort to get up to speed. So again, I have more knowledge of this subject than you do by miles and miles. And so would you like to have a nice $10,000 bet or something, and we'll have a little test that we take live about who knows more about this physics history? You piece of shit. All right, anyway. He needs a teacher who will hold his hand. Yeah, well, that's what they did for Madame Chartelet. She had a tutor who held her hand, and he happened to be a Leibnizian nut who believed in solitons and monads, who believed all the matter had a soul. La 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 la. Okay, and show him where to step. I mean, this is just such putrid crap. I mean, FFS. He should at least display an understanding of what physics actually says. It says it takes fucking 16 times the fuel to go 4 times faster. That's what it says. Fuck. It says an 8-pound bowling ball is going twice the speed will knock down twice as many pins. Do you have a single shred of evidence indicating that has anything to do with reality? No. Oh, you're just such liars. You're such pathetic liars. All right. What physics actually says before barging through the door, trumpets blaring. So whatever the fuck that is, I've made physics drawings on the board. What blaring am I doing? Oh, you're just such amazing liars. Dunning-Kruger effect. Very long-running case. Did you take your medication today? I'm on the internet. You're the retard on the internet. Oh, God damn it. Let's see. He said I doxed him. Yes, you do it constantly. You do it at every opportunity you have. I do not publish under my name. The fact that you can know my name doesn't mean that you have a right to use it in these contexts. I know Piero's name. I actually know where the fuck he lives. Why the fuck would I make that public? I can find lots of people, incidental connections. I can do the research and I could find their name. Does that mean their name is public? Does it really mean that you have a right to use it in this context? Of course not. Why would anybody do that? Why would I use anybody's real identity who doesn't really, like I said, anybody who's going to challenge anybody is going to get threatened. You don't think it's a real threat, you fuckers? You create this hysteria over something. You create these fake metaphors and stories about how I killed people or I did this or I did that. And then you encourage psychotics to go look for these people. Do you understand what you're doing, you fuck? Are you so fucking dishonest that you won't even admit that you're trying to threaten my existence by doing this? There's no other purpose to it. None. You will not find any information about me by using my real name. You have to use Emendum or DraftScience if you want to know anything about physics or anything about philosophy. Why the fuck would you use my real name? You piece of shit. You should be blind and blocked by everybody. Everybody should just concede doxers are the pieces of suck. Anyone who is doxing somebody else should be shot on the internet. That means they should be shot off the internet because there's no good purpose to it ever. It's never done for any good reason. It's a universal shit tactic. Only a weasel does it. Okay. I said his name, LOL. It's been known since like 2007. It's on my fucking websites, okay? You had to register domains and you had to publish your name. Does that mean because I have a website, you have to publish my name? Get serious, you fuck. There's absolutely no good reason to use my real legal name in any of these interactions. None. I know fucking Michael's real name. I don't think he wants me to use it. And this man's channel name was the town he lived in. So fucking what? Did anybody know that? No. And of course, the original channel was for the town. I was going to use the channel for local video productions. So that's why that name is there. And obviously the internet back in 2003 or whatever the fuck it was a very different internet than it is now. So you do know that too, right? That security became a real issue much later because all the loonies on the internet started showing up and there was no security against the lunatics. Oh, you're such a piece of shit. All right. The other day, while watching one of his videos, I heard him seriously ask, what the fuck does it mean to square a second? So I mean, squaring a velocity, I've said. But yes, how exactly do you square a time? I mean, what would a cube of time be exactly? What would a square of time be and what would a cube of time be? I mean, it's a linear process. And you really think there's multi-dimensions and time is happening? And what do you think is actually happening? I'm sorry. I just don't even understand why you people would actually buy into any of this notion that time isn't a perfectly linear line. And there really isn't anything else to it. There's past, present, future, and it's just moving on a line. The guy doesn't even appear to understand that you carry the units through the calculation so you know the units of the result. So what does that even mean? So that's not even a sentence, right? That's not a sentence anybody could interpret. Please, somebody interpret that piece of shit. It's purely an effect of algebra. What the fuck are you talking about? An effect of algebra. You're pretending there's a second dimension to time. It doesn't have one dimension, it's in 2 dimensions. And then you can make it 3 dimensions by cubing it. What are you talking about? Don't you understand what a square is? Okay. But he's trying to derive an interpretive concept out of it. I mean, I don't, this is just such drivel. It speaks volumes. I don't know who to. I mean, maybe a psychotic. You're talking to him because you're talking like a dog. Barf, 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 barf. And the psychotic hears, Gary, kill Gary. Yeah. He doesn't know math and how it applies to physics. So it's just so funny. He's saying, I don't know math because I know a square means a dimensional change. So I don't know math because it's not a dimensional change. Oh, okay. I mean, ridiculous character, he says. So this is the tripe, okay, Physics Michael, you have encouraged now, okay, by saying basically, don't be a shithead, but go ahead because I'll reward you by, I might even plus it, I might even heart one of your moronic comments. All right, let's see. He doesn't believe in inertia either. So again, inertia isn't a thing, okay? So I can point out where Julius Sumner says it's just mass, where Professor Lewin says it's just mass. I can point that out, So yeah, obviously I believe in mass. I don't believe masses have moats around their castle and are trying to prevent motion from coming in. They're not preventing motion. They're just saying, you want to make me rich? Go ahead, give me the money. But until you give me the money, Yeah, I can't be rich. Yeah, that's what they're saying. Oh, these people are just such. I mean, I have made this argument so many times. There is no resistance to motion. There's just an obligation to give it. You have to give something typhoid for it to have typhoid. Okay, I'm interested to see more of his elemental physics, i.e., everything is made of force bits moving. Well, the simulation does work. I have showed it over and over again, but whatever. Your writes he's a character, whatever that means, an entertaining character. So all of this is way irrelevant. This is the only issue here is just: do you think physics should be challenged, or should it just leave everything unproven? Should they redo the Eddington experiment from 400 times better resolution space? Would you actually vote for it? Okay, if it costs, like, say, $76. Okay, it's going to cost $76 of satellite time to do the experiment. We're going to have one of those guys on the space station before they evacuate forever, take the telescope and do the experiment. And, we have to pay him $47 an hour. I mean, okay, I'm just saying. I'm just joking, but I mean, can you lift your hand and actually say, yes, they should do that? Can you actually understand that it's a really important experiment and it really should be done well and right to prove the actual point? That optical light, that is an image of things, the image is changed in its position based on gravity bending the photons. That they should actually prove that the actual photons are actually bent by the actual force of gravity. That they should actually prove that. And to Einstein's specifications, which is twice as much bending. I mean, I'm saying they haven't even proved it's bent by gravity, let alone that it's been proven that it's bent twice as much by gravity. You fucktard. Do you give a shit about physics actually having to do anything called science? I mean, you really want it to just be a fucking dogmatic religion, right? The little nerdy fucking puttards in their little ivory spaceship are going to tell you about, they're going to use all of their Star Wars rhetoric, and go get some, neutrino engines and go get some delirium crystals, and you just don't care about reality, right? You don't care about the truth at all. Oh, man, I just hate these fuckers. All right, this is probably his only way to socialize with others. Sad. Why would I want to socialize with cretins like you? And that's what I see on Earth all over the place, is ignorant, fucking, drooling, monkey cretins. That's all that's on this fucking planet, okay, is low-grade, unsophisticated, fuck-charted, stinkingly, putridly silly brains. None of you are doing anything with your gray matter but barfing with it, finding better ways to barf. Ugh. God, it's just so revolting that this tripe could be typed and there really isn't any, there's no rational person that shows up. Could you really say something about the actual subject of the video, you motherfucker? God, I just hate this planet. I just hate it. Fuck. I really am rooting for a giant comet to fly into you people. Oh, it would just be, I'd be just so fucking happy. Yeah, all right. God, I can't wait. And I really want it to come slowly enough so you panic all over the place. That I would just feed on. Oh. That would be my Dracula moment, okay, in the blood bank. I would just be, feed on them getting what they fucking deserve. This scummy, stupid, ignorant crap, pretending it has a brain, pretending it's using it in some kind of honest, logical way. Ugh, it's disgusting, the fakery. You're all such fake pieces of shit. Enough said.